Hello everyone, That's My Say 2.0 is proud to present Made in TBurg. Sports talk for sports people. Many of you already know, and for those who don't, That's My Say 2.0 is a sports news column out of Tillsonburg, Ontario. We're also on Facebook. Come on Facebook, like us if you wish. All you got to do is type in That's My Say 2.0. Check us out. We're mostly hockey people, but we talk about other sports and we dabble in other things. And hell, we even make predictions come football season. The only thing that we don't do is we don't try and be vulgar on the page just because of younger eyes reading us. We want it. It's more of an adult page, but yet we encourage kids to check us out just because we have an initiative in our area, Tillsonburg, Ontario, where we want to try and help and see if we can get more kids playing sports as well. Our philosophy and our motto is you can play. It doesn't matter who you are, you can play. As I was saying, That's My Say 2.0's. This is the first broadcast of Made in TBurg, first full broadcast, and we're pretty excited about this. We're coming to you right downtown Tillsonburg, Ontario, and it's a fun time. What we're going to talk about here today, though, people, is hockey. I know it's tough because it's the off season, it's the dog days of summer, and you think, why do you want to talk hockey? Well, there's a lot of people in Canada that love hockey. A lot of people just don't put the game away in the summertime because they're excited about what their team has done in the off season. And if your team's bad, you have hope. Look at the Maple Leafs last year after drafting Austin Matthews. There was hope. The talk was, is Mitch Marner going to make the team? Is William Nylander and Mitch Marner going to be right up there in the Rookie of the Year race with Austin Matthews? Is Frederik Andersen going to be the goalie that we think he can be? All those questions were answered. And here we are again, folks. Another summer of lots. Now, I don't want to talk about just the Maple Leafs today. What I'm going to talk about, and this is something for the poolies and the fantasy people that will enjoy, and that's 10 players I think that will be traded anytime between now and the next July 1st free agency period. And folks, if you think trades don't happen, they do happen at this time of the year. For example, Wayne Gretzky, when he was traded from Edmonton to Los Angeles, that happened in August, folks. Check it out. If you don't believe me, check it out. But it happened. And shame on that trade. More so, shame on Peter Pocklington. For just taking the money and being a criminal that he is. Right now, there's a bit of a lull in the NHL, and people are wondering why. Well, there's lots of young players that are trying to get as much money as they can. So they're filing for arbitration. Arbitration hearings will come up very soon. Teams don't want to go to arbitration, so they try and make an offer while they can. It's very business-like. If you don't, it's all about money, right? What will happen is once some of these players get signed that are going to arbitration, you'll see a flux of players be signed because these players are dictating where their team salary cap is at that point. So if you're worried about Jaromir Jagr not being signed, Jerome McGinley, and even maybe Shane Doan, don't worry. They're gonna play again in the NHL this year. Mark my words. And if you're a Montreal Canadiens fan and you're a Jaromir Jagr fan, I think those two will get together. Something tells me Jagr would be a good fit in Montreal. I don't necessarily think that Montreal should get him, but there's a connection there. Keep your eyes open. Maybe it'll happen. Maybe it won't. So anyway, as I mentioned, we're going to talk about 10 players who I think are going to be traded between now and July 1st, 2018. So here's the rundown of the players we're going to talk to you about before we take a small little break. Toronto Maple Leafs James Van Riemsdyk, Toronto Maple Leafs Tyler Bozak, Edmonton Oilers Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Los Angeles Kings Dustin Brown, Buffalo Sabres Evander Kane, Ottawa Senators Dion Phaneuf of the Ottawa Senators, Montreal Canadiens Max Pacioretty, Colorado Avalanche Matt Duchene, Winnipeg Jets Jacob Trouba, and kind of a surprise that I think many of you might think, because it seems impossible, but I'm going to put the Sedin twins on this list. And I'm going to have a couple honorable mentions throughout the broadcast. So, you know what? I'm going to take a break, and we're going to come back, and I'm going to go through each player and why I think they're going to be traded. And I might have some ideas. They could be, and I don't like to speculate a whole lot. However, that's the world that we live in. Alright, folks, we're back. As I mentioned before, I've got a top 10 list of players, but before we get underway, I wanna give a special thanks out to Pinky. He did the theme music to this here, and I can't be more pleased how this young guy has really taken off in 2017. He had an awful end to 2016, and he's just excelling right now with his band Dog Drool. He wrote this theme. A good young kid to look out. Check out Dog Drool on Facebook if you will. Find out where they're playing. Check them out. I encourage you. I haven't seen them live yet, but I've wanted to, and unfortunately because of professional scheduling I haven't been able to, but I've followed them and I've listened to them on various points on Facebook, and listening to them, I want to get there to see them play live. So check them out. Anyway, as I said, top 10. Here we go. Now, these guys are not in any particular order. It's just players I've listed. They don't have a value over the other. I think we can all picture who's the most valuable in those top 10 and why they are. But I'm going to start with the Toronto Maple Leafs here. Yeah, I am a Maple Leaf fan, but it's hard not to be a Maple Leaf fan in Southern Ontario. There's lots of us, so if you're not a Leaf fan, well, shame on you, but good for you too, because you haven't put up with what I've put up with for all of my life. You know, the losing and being full of shit, right? Anyway, James Van Riemsdyk, he's coming into the last year of his contract. Why I think he's going to get traded is, quite frankly, they can't afford to keep everybody and pay the kids. They've got 2 years before they got to make a decision on what they're going to pay Austin Matthews. Man, I don't know why I wanted to say Connor McDavid. I guess I wish I could have Connor McDavid over Austin Matthews, but who wouldn't? Austin Matthews is a good player, though. He's going to be great for the Leafs, as he's already demonstrated. But how much are they going to pay Austin Matthews after the McDavid contract? Is it $10 million? I can't imagine a player getting $10 million, but there's guys doing it now. How about Mitch Marner? I think Mitch Marner is just going to get better and better as we go along. Like, people don't think he's as good as Austin Matthews. I think he's probably equal in a different way, because he does some things you just drop your jaw and say, how did he do that? Kind of like Patrick Kane. They're very similar in stature and style of play. Oh, and they both came out of the London Knights system. Anyway, back to JVR. JVR is in the last year of his contract. He's making $5.25 million, I believe it is. What are you going to pay this guy? I'm imagining this guy's going to want to get paid good. I'm picturing at least 5 years, anywhere between 5 to 7 years. I think the price tag is going to start at $7 million, maybe $7.5 million. So let's just take the 5 years, for example. Are you willing to give James Van Riemsdyk and a cap that's $75 million? $7 million times 5. That's $35 million. We don't know if the cap's going up or not. It may. But it doesn't look like it's going up an awful lot year by year. And then you got other contracts that you got to consider. Are you going to bring back Leo Komarov? Are you going to bring back Tyler Bozak? At the end of this upcoming season, the 2017-18 season, William Nylander needs a new contract. Now, he's part of your future, so you're definitely paying him. Now, I don't know if they're going to bridge William Nylander prior to the Matthews-Marner contracts, but they're going to want something. And I just don't see the Maple Leafs trading. You know, I think this is the one trade that could happen before the season starts. I mean, they've got Patrick Marleau in place. And speaking of Patrick Marleau, it was a good signing by all means, because it shows the Maple Leaf fans that the rebuild's over. All right, they're going for it now. There's a couple needs that the Maple Leafs have as well, in addition. With the addition of Dominic Moore and Patrick Marleau, that veteran leadership, the guys that you think have led and can show the kids the way as far as leadership are here. And I look down the middle and I think to myself, there's a good chance that we're going to own puck possession a lot this season. There's a few little things that worry me, but I think they can be addressed easily. Now, we know Mike Babcock loves a right-shot defenseman, and he's missing one. I don't think the Toronto Maple Leafs want to start the season with Marchenko and Marinson. These two guys are idiots. If at best one of these guys should fight for who's going to be the seventh defenseman, because they're not very good, period. And I had a chat with my good friend Andrew Dawson about this. Shout out to you, buddy. Hope the Pelicans are kicking some ass this season. But I was talking to him about this situation, and I said, with the loss of James Neal in Nashville, they're missing a lot of scoring in Nashville, and they think they're close. So, what do you do? Like, do you offer James Van Riemsdyk to these guys, and what do you get in return? Like, we know Nashville's not afraid of moving their best defenseman. Look at last year, Weber for Subban. Now, I'm not going to tell you that we're going to get PK Subban in a Maple Leaf jersey. Although, in the Stanley Cup final, the boys in the room wanted PK Subban to shut the hell up. But I'm not suggesting that, because I don't think PK and Babcock could coexist. His game is different from what Mike Babcock's idea of what his game should be. And if you don't believe me on that, turn back to the 2014 Sochi games, how he didn't hardly get to play. Babcock had a reason. So, now, but could Matthias Ekholm be a Maple Leaf? Could you trade for him? How about Roman Josi? Or even Ryan Ellis? Now, all these guys seem unlikely, but who saw the trade with Weber for Subban coming? I don't think any of us. And how about Johansson and Jones? Good trade in the end for both teams. But did you see it coming? I don't think so. I didn't. I'm always up on this stuff, and I didn't see it coming. And then after that, I thought to myself, Lou Lamoriello has got a deep connection with a lot of people in the game. Marty Brodeur's the assistant GM in St. Louis nowadays. They've got a connection. And I find it hard to just believe St. Louis is happy with giving Colton Parayko 5.5 a year for 5 years. Now, this kid is a good defenseman. A good, big body, right shot defenseman that can skate very well. Who would be very good on a pairing with Morgan Riley. Or even better, Jake Gardner. Because Gardner's game could calm down a little bit. And when he wants to take some risks, he's got that insurance policy backing him up. Now, I don't think this trade is likely, and I thought this before Colton re-signed his contract because he was an RFA, and I thought, you know what? I'm surprised nobody's given an offer sheet. It's amazing these things don't happen more now. But realistically, could you not trade for him? I would take 5.5 a year times 5 over the idea of having to pay 7.5 a year to JVR, because you can cut some costs in other ways. Like you could ship somebody out or not re-sign somebody, because there's more than one free agent that's going to be available, or having to decide who to keep. And for me, JVR, he's just not that guy I got to keep. As much as it pains me to suggest, it's been a nice run in Toronto for JVR. I hope he does well, but he's not going to be a Leaf come 2018-19 season, and that's all I got to say about that. The other player that of mine of the Toronto Maple Leafs is Tyler Bozak. Now, this is an interesting one here. His contract is very interesting because you could say that the Leafs are getting a bargain off this guy at $4.2 million. And the ironic thing is, Tyler Bozak, it's a love-hate thing in Toronto. And what I mean by that is Tyler Bozak has a unique value in the NHL, period. He's not a number one center, but he has been in Toronto. He's a great passer, excellent on the power play, kills penalties, scores some timely goals, and the fans love him for the most part. So there's some haters, but there is everywhere. He's been a quality player, a good soldier, and a victim of circumstances. Oh, and did I mention he wins faceoffs? He does that very well. When I say he was a victim of circumstances, I remember back when they had a choice to re-sign this guy. Now, keep in mind, Phil Kessel, his buddy, was on the right side of him. And the free agent class was poor. So, what are you going to do to replace Tyler Bozak as your number one center? Tim Connolly didn't work out in Toronto. Kadri wasn't well liked by the Maple Leaf coaches, Ron Wilson, Randy Carlyle, and I'm going to assume all the assistant coaches too, because it took them a while to actually get to play on a regular basis in the NHL. Oh, and Randy Carlyle didn't like Mikhail Grabowski at all. So you had to keep Tyler Bozak because you weren't getting anything better. And yet, when Kessel and this team didn't want to perform, he suffered as well as everybody else. Like when that line did not go, like JVR's numbers, I think, suffered as much because these two guys, when we looked at them this year together, and they were with a kid who, now, and keep in mind, Mitch Marner could have a little bit of a sophomore jinx. I think he's the real deal, though. But you see the effort through 82 games, and they didn't score every night, of course. But it was a complete game that they had. So even when they weren't scoring, they were doing things to contribute to the offense. So that's the key here. Like, what's his value? I think you could get him at 5.5 a year. But you're not likely keeping him if Austin Matthews can win a faceoff. Everything is going to determine on what Austin Matthews can do. So, if anything, Tyler Bozak is a trade deadline move. or he walks for free, which I don't suggest the Leafs should do. A quality guy like that, you can't let go for free. But if Austin Matthews wins faceoffs, William Nylander will move to center before too long. The plan has always been for Nylander to play center. I don't think he's the center. I think his size tells me that he can't do it. Same with Mitch Marner. I don't think they will ever play center on a regular basis in the NHL. It just doesn't seem likely. There's too many big bodies that go up against them. I don't see it working out, and it's a puck possession game. Now, he will be re-signed, Bozak, if Matthews can't win a faceoff. And that's not a fail. That just means he needs more time. Even Sidney Crosby had his flaws with the faceoff circle when he started in the league. It's one of those things that you have to practice over time. We know Nazem Kadri can't do it. He's horrible in the face. To me, he's a right winger. He's exactly what you want, like what you think of when you think of Phil Kessel. Kessel came in as a center, but because of Krejci, Savard, and Bergeron in Boston, he got moved to the wing. I kind of feel the same way about Kadri right now. I'd put Leo Komarov back at center. But make no mistake about it, Matthews has to do what you think he can do for Bozak to be traded. And I believe he is the real deal. But we'll see. We'll take another break and we'll be back with the next series of players on our top 10. Alright, folks, we're back. I left you off with the first 2 of 10, Tyler Bozak and James Van Riemsdyk. Now we're going to go to 3, 4, 5, and 6. This is an interesting bunch here. I written this list last year, the top 10, as I did this year. And you can find a copy of each issue at various locations in Tillsonburg, which I will get to, and you can find also on Facebook. But last year I put Ryan Nugent-Hopkins and Dustin Brown in my top 10 list for a couple reasons, and it kind of went the opposite way at the start of the offseason this year with Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. I thought Eberle was a guy that, I would have been traded, but I thought Nugent-Hopkins would have been traded before Jordan Eberle. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins was rushed to the NHL. I'm not going to indict him for too much poor play because I think he was a victim of the Oilers' desperation. But last year, he didn't help his cause on being the second-line center. You would think with the lineup the way it was, and they had a really good team. And I'll stress this right now. On paper, the Edmonton Oilers moving into the 2017-18 season are a cup contender on paper. But I don't think they're good enough to go that far right now. And the reason why is I look at Ryan Nugent-Hopkins and how he's not progressed at all. Like last year where less responsibility was on his shoulders because of what Connor McDavid was doing with the additions that they had on the blue line. Milan Lucic was... They got what they signed for with Milan Lucic. And unfortunately, it didn't get better for Nugent-Hopkins. He was a minus 10 overall that whole season. In the playoffs, I don't ever remember seeing him contribute much to the Oilers' success that they had for a round in 7 games. Matter of fact, the only time I heard him mention is when the guys on Sportsnet were saying that somehow Eberle and Nugent Hopkins were going to have to be effective and contribute offensively if the Oilers were going to beat the Ducks. Guess what? They didn't beat the Ducks, and they did nothing. I believe Nugent Hopkins had 4 helpers in 13 playoff games. Now, some guys get a little snake bit. I get that. But not with the... Like, guys stepped up on... Like, Zach Kassian, for crying out loud, was one of the best Oilers in the playoffs. There's no way Zach Kassian should be outperforming Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. No offense to either one of those players. But I think Kassian's a bit of a bum. No offense. But he's just not good enough. And, you know, I look at what's happened in Edmonton the last couple years. They finally decided we're sick and tired of losing. And they've got rid of all the players that stunk of failure. Taylor Hall was the first. You can argue that they got less than what they should have gotten for him with Adam Larson. But guess what? They needed that stud defenseman. And look at him now. You could say, well, he didn't produce enough in offense. Well, look at what the guy next to him, Oscar Klefbom, did. That defensive responsibility is as important as the offensive numbers. I would take a guy that's plus 20 over anybody that has about 40 points and minus 10 or minus 5. I know plus minus is subjective, but to me, if you're getting a minus, you're on the ice a lot when goals are scored against you. It's just that simple. But they got rid of Taylor Hall, as I mentioned. Nail Yakupov they couldn't wait to ship him out, and they took basically nothing just to get rid of him. That worked out pretty well, didn't it? Didn't help St. Louis any bit. We'll see how he does in Colorado. I think he'll do all right there because nobody's good there. So the comparison is, well, maybe Nathan McKinnon, but even he's suffered a lot because of the poor play of that team. And now Jordan Eberle. And people seem to think that the Islanders got the better end of the deal. And it's only the better end of the deal if Jordan Eberle plays like we think he could. Let's not mistake anybody. Ryan Strome's a good hockey player. Sure, he was buried on the fourth line with Martin and Clutterbuck, but this guy can do a lot. He can win faceoffs, he can kill penalties. And when he was put up on the top 2 scoring lines because of injuries, he held his own. Like he can put points on the board. So, but the question is, what do you get for Nugent Hopkins? It's very hard to understand what it is that they have. I still think they're thin on the blue line. I just, for whatever reason, I think they need more help on defense. I think you could take a guy that's a throw-in when it comes to the deal. Like you could probably get a nice young kid that's needs a fresh start. It might be a center, it might be a winger. But I would circle around the bandwagon for another defenseman. Absolutely. And one of the places I actually think Nugent Hopkins could benefit best is Detroit. I think it'd be a good fit. He's still a young center. But the way the system is in Detroit, I think could benefit him in the long run and kind of get him back on track to what we all thought Ryan Nugent Hopkins was when he's selected first overall. And in the East, he can beat Nazem Kadri a bunch of times in the face-off circle. That'll help. And my buddy Andrew Dawson would love to see a young center in Detroit. Wouldn't you there, buddy? Moving forward, Dustin Brown. I had him on my list last year because I didn't think Nashville had good enough leadership, and I thought they were going to eat that contract. It's hard to imagine somebody eating Dustin Brown's contract. Seeing how the man has 5 years left and just under $30 million to go. That's a tough contract. But just right around a day after the expansion draft, from what my understanding is, the Ottawa Senators had a deal in place to trade Dustin Brown to the Ottawa Senators for Dion Phaneuf. The Kings have made no secret that they're after another defenseman, and they were very much interested in Dion Phaneuf. Ottawa was very interested in taking the deal. However, there's just one little problem. Dustin Brown's limited no trade clause. It lists 7 teams that he has the right to say no to going to. Conveniently, all 7 Canadian teams are those cities that he selected. Why? I don't know. Maybe he just doesn't like Canada. Sad, because he played in Guelph for the Storm. They weren't very good all the time, but they were decent. So I don't understand that. Ottawa looks like a good team right now. LA does not. So I would try and win another cup if I could. Mind you, Ottawa has a history of choking, as we know. Right, Leaf fans? The only two teams I could think of at the top of my list that would even dream about trying to take on this contract, or even if the Kings were to retain some of it, would maybe the Carolina Hurricanes, because they have a lack of leadership right now. Mind you, it wouldn't work out. There's mostly former Blackhawks going there, so maybe that's not a good idea. And then Colorado. They have a huge lack of leadership. I mean, look at how they've performed. Either which way, the team that takes him is a gamble. And it has to be a team that's willing to buy him out if it doesn't work. It's that simple. Because that's way too much money for a guy that doesn't score you 50 points anymore. You'll be lucky if you get a dozen goals out of the guy. Good penalty killer, good checker. But you don't want to pay close to $6 million for that, do you? I don't. So I think it's time that, they figure this thing out. Even if Rob Blake's got to buy him out, I'd like to see him traded just to be right, but that might not happen. Next on my list is Max Pacioretty. Now, I know a lot of you are thinking there's no way possible Max Pacioretty is being traded out of Montreal. Well, check this out. They don't want Max Pacioretty wearing the C in Montreal. If they had their way, Shea Weber would be wearing the captaincy. That's a fact. You know this. He's been a captain. He's led everywhere he's been. And quite frankly, he's the best player to actually wear that C. But why is Max Pacioretty wearing it? Because they didn't want PK Subban to wear the C. You know management did not want Subban being their captain. And I'm not telling you it's because of race or anything like that, because I don't believe that for a second. I just believe the Montreal Canadiens are set in their ways. And a lot of it's because of their history, not race. If you don't believe me that they would not want Shea Weber wearing the C, listen to Egghead, Pierre Maguire. He thinks the same way. It's not just me. Others think the same. But if that's not enough, Max Pacioretty, just this early part of the offseason after they were bumped by the New York Rangers, his Brassard mansion sold for $2 million. Selling a house. Does that mean he's leaving? We don't know. Now, the family has reported that they're going to move somewhere larger. But they didn't say they were buying the place, so I would assume if the man is selling off his house, he's trying to cut loose ends if he does leave town. There are 7 players on the Montreal Canadiens roster that make more money than the captain, Max Pacioretty. Their best offensive weapon next to Weber. Max Pacioretty is a perennial 30-goal scorer. A couple years ago, he was shy of a 40-goal season, which has been a long time since that's happened, hasn't it, Habs fans? So, he's scored 30-plus goals for the last 4 straight years. He's been great. Like, he's a very good player. I mean, nobody can discount what he brings to your team. I know some people that are going to be very heartbroken if he does get traded, and probably very pissed off with me because of it, me mentioning it. But Pacioretty's making $4.2 million, and he's got 2 years left on his deal. That contract, let's just say that the Montreal Canadiens, out of the gate, don't perform well. Are they going to fire the coach that they just hired? Probably not. Because I bet you the coach, who watched Pacioretty a lot in Boston, has got his opinions about him. Or how to use him. And I don't think he dislikes Pacioretty. I just think when you match up against a guy as often as you do, you notice things. Claude Julien is a champion. He was a part of Babcock's World Cup of Hockey, Team Canada. He's part of the Sochi Olympics coaching squad. And of course, he head coached the Boston Bruins to a Stanley Cup. Conveniently, where the same year they won the Cup, if they didn't make it past the first round, he likely would have been fired. If you remember that 7-game series against the Montreal Canadiens that looked like it was Montreal's series, and they just took it back. At $4.2 million, when he becomes a free agent, how much is it going to cost? Like JVR, how much is it going to cost? But not only keep your best offensive weapon up front, but your captain. Should he make $10 million like Carey Price? No. Carey Price right now is the best goalie in the world. That's why you pay him $10 million. Which I think he probably could have got more money. I think he gave a good discount for that. I mean, make no mistake about it. They go south in a hurry. They're trading Max Pacioretty because that's the only thing they got that can get the most value right away. When the Toronto Maple Leafs moved Phil Kessel, and a lot of people still say that the Leafs took too little to move Kessel, and that's probably true. But they're not paying for it. Right? In any contract that they were going to move, Kessel's, Phaneuf's, they were going to have to retain salary. That was going to happen. So trading that, it worked out for as good as Toronto could have had it. But Max Pacioretty, where in a league where goals are hard to come by, you could get a lot for him. You could probably get 2-3 prospects, good prospects. You could probably get 2 high-end picks. Maybe a decent player that can play right away. Maybe 2. You could hold a team at ransom. For example, if you take the Vancouver Canucks, I bet you could fleece them of half of their AHL team. And I bet you half of those guys are better than half the guys that are already lined up in Montreal right now. Betcha. Check it out. But Max Pacioretty needs to go. As simple as that. We're going to take a break and we'll be back. All right, folks, we're back, and I just noticed something, folks. I promised you Evander Kane and Dion Phaneuf before Max Pacioretty, and I apologize to you, folks. I skipped ahead. I for my first broadcast, I've made a few notes here, so I accidentally skipped. I have like a 9-piece itinerary where I wanted to section it off where I had the Sedins and Pacioretty in that segment, and I apologize to you folks. So, a little makeshift. Who says you can't make mistakes in broadcasting, eh? The difference is I want to kind of do this in one take, if possible, or 2 takes, not constantly be at this all the time. I mean, people make mistakes, right? I'm human, just like all of you. So, moving forward, Dion Phaneuf, as I mentioned, there was a deal put in place with the Los Angeles Kings. I'm still of the belief that Dion Phaneuf could still be an LA King before too long. And here's why. They're not shy in Tinseltown about wanting Phaneuf. I think Phaneuf, because he's married to Alicia Cuthbert, would like to, I guess, probably make her life a lot easier too. Maybe less commute back and forth. Mind you, air miles is a great thing. So I if you gotta fly back and forth, why not get air miles, right? And use them. That's just my opinion. I mean, because I love living in Canada. No offense. There's a lot of great places in the United States. I've seen a lot. I love those destinations that I've been to, and there's more for me to go to. But I love living in Canada. It's home for me. But as I said, Dion Phaneuf, like I try and understand this, and I know that the Kings need help on defense, but is Dion Phaneuf really the guy that's going to make that team better all of a sudden? I don't think it is. What they need is they need to switch philosophies. They've had that big body wear you down, not quite rope-a-dope, but just tire you out. Like, they hit you and they hit you and they hit you. That's a Sutter thing right there for you. And I think they need to focus on other characteristics and get faster. Because if you look at the Western Conference now with the Edmonton Oilers, the Winnipeg Jets are not too far behind, by the way, guys. The Calgary Flames are on their way as well. And I still want to believe that the Coyotes are on their way as well. I mean, I know it sounds weird. Mind you, they just need to get the hell out of Arizona. Truthfully. That product on that team will get a lot better in a hurry. So the Kings just need to get faster. But other than LA, I don't understand where Ottawa's going to make a move to get better right away. You've got Erik Karlsson out for the first month of the season. And you signed Johnny Oduya to a 1-year, $1 million contract, which, by the way, that's a steal. He's going to have a good year and might have just replaced Mark Mathot way cheaper. It's hard to imagine replacing Mathot. He is a stalwart on the blue line. But they got a pretty good one in Oduya. Make no mistake about it. But that power play shot, like Cody Ceci is just getting better. He's just finally learning how to really become a quality defenseman in the NHL. And I think a lot of that's because of Dion Phaneuf. Dion Phaneuf was pretty good in Ottawa last year. He was one of the key guys that got them to where they were going. So trading him right now I don't think is a good idea. But I think it's going to happen because they do have some holes in Ottawa, and they want to keep things in budget so that they can make moves at the deadline to take another run at this thing. If you ask me, I would bury him in Colorado. Try and take a run at Duchesne. Colorado is not going to be good for at least 3 years. At least. And even then, I'm not so sure because I don't like the goalie. I think he's a bum. But if you could bury him somewhere and get something. Not even necessarily get Duchesne per se. There's some quality other players there that would just improve the play of the Ottawa Senators. Now, I mentioned Duchesne because they were in on him at the deadline, Ottawa, and they weren't able to pull the trigger because the price at that point was too high. That price hasn't changed in Joe Sakic's mind, by the way. In Joe Sakic's mind, this is an elite player, and for most of us, we agree. And this guy does need a change of scenery. But we haven't heard Gabriel Landeskog's name mentioned in a while, and he was in talks of trade around the deadline too. Could you pluck that guy away from Colorado? I'm not sure. Maybe. Mind you, it would take more than Dion Phaneuf to pull that deal off. But Ottawa has probably one of the better prospect pools in the league. The Canadian teams have got some good prospect pools. The Jets, the Maple Leafs, the Senators. 3 best teams in Canada with prospects in their system. And then after that, you got to go down south. I think the Islanders have a decent pool of kids. Tampa, if you don't believe they got good kids on the way, look how close they got to the playoffs last year. With basically everybody injured, they got some good kids. At the same point, I think Philadelphia, if they wanted to improve their team, a defenseman would be necessary as well. I don't know what you would get back in return. That seems fair to me, because most of the guys Philly's got that's really good, they're not giving away. So Dion Phaneuf, he might get traded. I think there's a likelihood. They might have to retain contract on that as well. But look for him to get moved. Evander Kane. Let me tell you, this guy's fun to watch and listen to in the news every day. I mean, you would think this guy would learn his lesson after getting booted out of Winnipeg. Then again, nobody wants to play in Buffalo. If you say otherwise, I'm going to call you a liar. Because look at the history of players, not just Sabres, but the Buffalo Bills as well. People don't want to play in Buffalo, which is unfortunate. I like Buffalo, the city. Great city. Awesome freaking wings. It's too bad people don't want to play in Buffalo. Speaking of trades around the draft, the Kings also had another deal prospectively in place to obtain Evander Kane. Now, from what I've heard from sources, from NHL insiders, I can't reveal, unfortunately, Jake Muzzin was the player of interest for Buffalo, and of course, Rob Blake laughed. So no, that ain't happening. And that was the end of the discussion. Unfortunately, when the Kings are trying to get another defenseman, they're not going to try and give one up right away unless it's somebody that they just got to cut bait with. And I don't think anybody here thinks Jake Muzzin's that guy. But yeah, I mean, with all the stuff that's going on in Kane's world, I should call it Kane's world. It's like a fantasy land there. From all the stuff that he does and posts on Twitter to his non-criminal harassment charge. I don't understand that, by the way, guys. It's non-criminal, but it's harassment. So why is this guy getting a pending charge on him that was dropped? I don't get that. Maybe somebody that knows the law better can fill me in on this. I'd love to know. But aside from all the shenanigans that entertain me, because I like to laugh, this guy is a pretty talented hockey player nonetheless when he's playing. And unfortunately, he just needs to play more and shut up more. And he's currently making $5.25 million. I don't see an interest in bringing him back in Buffalo because of those off-ice issues, the attitude. And not to mention, you got to re-sign Jack Eichel at the end of the year for another contract. And you know they're not going to bridge Jack Eichel. He's the franchise right now in Buffalo. He's probably going to get, I'm going to guess, 8 years, 8, maybe 9 million a year. If Connor McDavid's making 12 million, and if Austin Matthews was born a day earlier, he would have been the second pick in that draft. Eichel would have been third. I think Matthews will get 10 million. So that must mean Eichel's going to get just a little underneath of that. But it wouldn't surprise me they said $10 million for him too. It just wouldn't. Possible places I think Evander Kane could fit in is why not go home? Go back to Vancouver and play. I don't think that's out of the question. At some point, the team's going to have to rebuild this team and have a face around it. I love Bo Horvat, but I think he's not the face of that team. I think he's going to be a franchise player somewhere else. I think Bo Horvat. So the door's open for somebody like Evander Kane to come in and. I mean, who wouldn't love the hometown boy coming home over there? I mean, they need something to cheer for, and like I said, he does have talent. Like, he is a good hockey player. But at the same time, I think of his style of play, and I think it just fits with the Boston Bruins or even the Philadelphia Flyers. I mean, he has a true power forward game that I think both teams embrace as well as most teams should. And they just, like I said, he can be mean and nasty when he wants to be. And, of course, I picture those teams because of historical reasons. But Philadelphia and Boston, they always go back to the well of doing that. So I think that's another reason why I think it'd be a good fit. I wouldn't rule out the Anaheim Ducks either. They're very thin on the left side, and they've got lots of trade commodities. I mean, I'm not saying Rickard Rakell, but it's a possibility. You're not moving Silverberg. That's unfortunate for most teams, especially Ottawa. Imagine if Ottawa could redo the Bobby Ryan trade all over again. I think I would have waited for Silverberg because he's turned out to be a hell of a hockey player. But aside from all the Ducks that are on that roster, there's lots of talent there that could be had. We'll have to wait and see on that one. As we know, the Ducks are the window's closing real soon on the Ducks and their chances of another Stanley Cup. I think it's closer than people think, though. Now, the one that's going to surprise you that I talked about, the Sedin twins. Many of you can't picture the Sedin twins ever leaving Vancouver. For one, nobody wants them because if you get one, you have to have them both. And I agree with that, but this is a deadline deal. As salary keeps ticking and ticking and ticking away throughout the course of the year, you're not paying $14 million to two players. You're paying a lot less. And in a world, in a league where you can pay guys $10 million more, Kopitar, Taves, Kane, McDavid, Price, you could make a deal at the deadline to trade the Sedins if you're Vancouver. And make no mistake about it, for Vancouver to get on with the rebuild like they need to cut rope with the Sedin twins. It's over. You can't do it with these guys anymore. Can they win a Stanley Cup somewhere else? Maybe. If the team that got hot at the right time, of course. Where would the Sedins want to go? I think Detroit would be a place, even though they don't look like they're a Stanley Cup contender right now. The thought of playing with Henrik Zetterberg and Nicholas Kronwall, I think they would enjoy that a great deal. Somewhere where there's lots of Swedes, of course. But what about New York? They're very thin down the middle. I don't see how they're going to be as good as they were last year. Trading Trading Derek Stepan was probably a necessary need, but they thinned themselves out down the middle. And I get the reasons why you trade him, because you've had a few kicks at the can at this and you hadn't won nothing. I think they should have traded Rick Nash first, because I think he's done nothing for the New York Rangers of value. Like, he didn't take them to where they needed to go. And he was that piece where you thought, okay, they're going to make a serious run. They're likely going to win a cup. They didn't do it. But after Mika Zibanejad, you don't have much on the blue line. And I think that's a big issue in New York. What if Montreal plays like a playoff team, but not a top team? What if they're hovering around that area and they think they're still good enough and they can make a run in the playoffs? Maybe they go to Montreal, which would be a bad idea for Montreal because they still wouldn't win. You do have to find a way to move these guys if you're Vancouver. Where they go, I don't know. We'll take another break and we'll be back. We're back. Now, the main event. The two guys I left off the list because I think my logic of these two players themselves being traded for each other could happen. I'm talking about Matt Duchene and Jacob Trouba. While it's no secret after the holdout last year, Jacob Trouba still would desire to play in another market other than Winnipeg. And it has nothing to do with being in Winnipeg. He just wants more minutes and he wants a better